Warning: this review does contain spoilers. I highly suggest playing the game beforehand to get the full experience.
Hey Red, we're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Hey, what's up? Serpentine19 here with another random review. This time I'll be taking an in-depth look into Supergiant's action RPG Transistor. The game introduces you to a futuristic city in the midst of a crisis involving the process. You play as Red, a famous singer who has recently lost two of the most important things in her life, her voice and her lover, to a weapon known as Transistor. You are continually hunted for the Transistor, which holds some great unknown power. However, you are searching for a way to return what is now part of it back to the world. As always, quick links are available at the bottom of the screen to skip to whatever part you want to watch.
Hi, you okay? I see, sure. She wants to come along. We can use her.
Firstly and most importantly, Transistor should be played with a gamepad, particularly the 360 pad. The control scheme is much more relaxed, and the feedback from using abilities via the rumble pack make keyboard and mouse an inferior playing experience. Keyboard and mouse act similar to typical MOBA controls and just doesn't have the same relaxed playing style. Moving on, apart from having the general ARPG mechanics, Transistor introduces a tactical element via the turn mechanic. You are able to freeze time and perform a number of moves until your energy bar is depleted. It has to be used sparingly though, as afterwards you receive a short period of time where you are unable to use your abilities, which if not planned quite right, can end in a fair bit of damage coming your way. Transistor gives you plenty of chances before you actually hit a failure state in the game and die. If your health is depleted, you lose one of your abilities until you have none left and you officially die. The game started off fairly easy in terms of difficulty and had me looking for options in the menu to increase it, but that's not how Transistor does it. Instead, difficulty is applied through the limiters system, which are like mutagens that make the game harder through specific gameplay features. The abilities in the game are numerous and have active, additive and passive effects that fit into the many slots available in the Transistor to provide a nice range of combinations to play around with and to fit your playstyle. The introduction of new enemies as the game goes on will have you tinkering with your build while also preventing the gameplay from getting too stale in the later stages. Randomly generated obstacle barriers provide a reactionary environment to fight in and become more and more important as the game goes on. There was a missed opportunity to involve a certain platforming element to the game, with one of your default abilities allowing you to jump. Many times I found myself trying to jump over the barriers or small gaps in the environments. For the mechanics, I decided to take off a couple of points for the platforming missed opportunity, and that was it. Otherwise the mechanics in the game were solid, so I gave that a 38 out of 40. For the controls, I took a couple of points off for the keyboard just because it didn't feel as good as the controller, and being a PC port I feel like it should have felt better, but it's understandable the control scheme they had, but I still had to take off points there, and that left me with 38 out of 40 for the controls. For the objectives, I had no bad points here. It was all story driven objectives and it wasn't too forced with any of it, so yeah, a full 20 out of 20 for the objectives. And overall that gave the gameplay a 96 out of 100.
Wow. You asked for it. You got it.
Transistor uses a mixture of 2D and 3D art assets that maintain a beautifully artistic and slightly comic book-like style. It's bright and colourful at the beginning and starts to fade into a dulled white tone as the game goes on, attempting to make the world seem bleak. The enemies were simple in form but easily distinguishable from each other. The use of completely 2D cutscenes acted as an intermission between the different acts, with most being wallpaper quality. One thing that did bother me in some parts of the game was the overabundance of foreground assets. Obscuring my view and sometimes even losing my character at the beginning of some of the levels are some examples, and while it is a negative, it is a very minor one in an otherwise brilliantly artistic and beautiful graphic style. For the character models, I don't have any bad points. It all fit the art style and was all beautiful, so I gave that a 20 out of 20. For the environment models though, I felt that some spots were left open and some things were left a bit bare, so I gave that a 17 out of 20. For the textures, this was overall because I couldn't really distinguish if there was a worse one on each side of the character or the environment, so I just gave the textures a solid 40 out of 40. For the visual effects, everything was again pretty much perfect here, so 20 out of 20. One thing I do have to note though is that you can't change the aspect ratio in the graphics options, and that was a bit of a down point. I had to record in a 4:3 instead of the usual 16:9, so I'm taking a point off there for the overall graphical score. So that left the graphics score at a total of 96 out of 100.
When you speak, I hear silence. Every word a defiance. I can hear, oh, I can hear.
Transistor had one of the more moving soundtracks that continually reminded you of Red's inability to sing anymore. This was helped by the ability to hum along to all of the background tracks while in the game, and the flashback to Red singing along with the game's main theme. When you enter turn mode, the music gets stripped back to a very basic and with a somewhat underwater feel to it that gives the mode a somewhat relaxing feel compared to the chaos that is going on in the real time around you. The character sounds work perfectly both in action sequence and when delivering storyline dialogue. One thing that might be overlooked is how they managed to make the click-clacking sound of Red's heels unobtrusive while also filling the empty spaces of the abandoned world you're exploring. It's something that could have easily been overdone or underdone, but it was done just right. The voice acting on Transistor's part mainly is great, and they managed to stay away from the annoying friend that won't stop talking. The character sound, however, does take a back seat for the game's magnificent soundtrack. For the environment sound, I gave the game a 50 out of 50. The soundtrack was just perfect and is a great addition to anyone's music library. For the character sounds, I think the character was just slightly trumped by the environment sounds in the quality, so I gave the character sounds a 49 out of 50. That gave the sound an overall score of 99 out of 100.
Welcome. Well, come in, come on. Inside my studio. I'm quite unarmed, as you can see. And it's safe in here, relatively. Safe. Yeah, at least for now.
Transistor manages to throw you into a world with little to no information while feeding you small snippets of information via message boards, your ability origins, and Transistor himself. The abilities you use are tied to people that have died either to the Transistor or by passing. Each one introduces you to new characters and new perspectives to the world you're in. The message boards show you just how artificial this city is, with the citizens voting on things like the sky color or the weather. They also allow you to interact as Red to give you a sneak peek into her personality, as well as the continuous remarks from Transistor relating to the content. If you're someone who likes challenge modes, there is speed, tactical, etc. challenges available to play, each earning you additional XP. These are accessed from a sort of retreat found behind secret doors in the world and allow you to unlock and listen to the game's wonderful soundtrack. The limiter system, as mentioned in the gameplay section, is Transistor's way of dealing with difficulty modes. These add additional gameplay elements like faster enemy respawns and just more enemies to deal with. They can be mixed and matched and can provide quite a challenge if all were to be enabled. For the features score, one thing I would have liked to see implemented a lot more is the ability to change the world. Like, you could change the sky color, or, well actually no, you couldn't change the sky color, you could vote on the sky color, but you could actually change the weather at the very end of the game. And I would have liked to see that implemented a little bit better, say you being able to change the water color, or what color street lights were, or something like that, just to feel like you were able to change and interact with this digital world a little bit more. So for the features score, I gave it 97 out of 100.
I am calling for a truce. See, I'd very much like for the process to, well, stop doing what it's doing. And my conjecture is you'd very much like that too.
The story in Transistor has you intrigued from start to finish. The pieces of the puzzle are slowly introduced as the game goes. However, there are elements that are never fully revealed and left to the player's imagination. The game does a terrific job at creating a connection between the player and Transistor without you even noticing. The small inputs he provides throughout the game and the inability for Red to speak creates an almost necessary companionship. I found myself actually getting upset when Transistor first begins losing his power. I hoped that he wouldn't leave or die, as he had become such a massive part of the game and the story. The main force behind the game's story is to find out more about this futuristic city, to find out why it had become so barren that you seemed to be the only living thing left. The message boards provided information on how the city worked, and had me wanting to go up to them and find out more rather than just walk by. The stories behind your abilities gave insight on what certain people were like and what they thought of the things happening around them. About 3/4 of the way through, the game leans to an expected ending as you become fully aware of the action's outcome and the general feeling given from the world. It teases hope at the very last second with the ability to rebuild, but quickly leads to the almost inevitable. Transistor offers up replayability with its limiter feature, allowing you to change up the gameplay and make it more difficult. The combination of skills, while various, do have optimal setups. If you can overlook these, however, and challenge yourself with different builds, they too can add to the replayability of the game. The story is linear in its path and doesn't attribute anything else to the replay value, but will be a standout in your first playthrough. For the story, I think the ending could have been better paced. A little snippet of information is given on early on that if you pick up on it and you pay attention to it, you can pretty much guess what the ending will be. So I think if they paced that, or even kept that information out and had it in there better at the very end, that would have worked a lot better. So for the story, I gave it a 47 out of 50. For the game's replayability, the gameplay was basic, but it fits the 4 to 5 hour gameplay experience that is the first time you play it. However, going back, while there are the limiters that can change the gameplay a little bit here and there, and you can mix up the abilities attributed to the Transistor, I don't think it was quite enough for this to get a perfect score. So I gave the game's replayability a 45 out of 50. This gave the total score for the replayability and the story a 92 out of 100. Now, to wrap it all up, for the gameplay, I thought the platforming was a missed opportunity at a great mechanic for the game, and the keyboard controls kinda sucked, so I gave that a 96 out of 100. For the graphics, everything here got top scores, except for the environment models, where I thought there were some sections of the game where they were missing assets and it just felt a little bit empty, and for the overabundance of assets in some other aspects of the game. Also, the inability to change the aspect ratio took 1 point off for the overall score, which gave the graphics a 96 out of 100. For the sound, The environment soundtrack is brilliant and definitely suggest checking it out and downloading it for your own personal music library. The character sounds were overshadowed by the environment sounds, so I took a point off there, and that gave the sound an overall score of 99 out of 100. For the features, I think that there was a missed opportunity with the ability to change the world. It was shown in a couple of sections on how it could be done, and you could do it at the very end there, but I think that should have been implemented a little bit more into there, so I gave the features a 97 out of 100. For the replay and the story, I think the story needed better pacing at the end, and the gameplay was fairly basic to extend your gameplay on a second playthrough. So I gave the replay and story a total of 92 out of 100. That gave Transistor a total of 96 out of 100. Now for my personal opinion score. While the game performs its main mechanic well, it does start to get a little bit old near the end. The addition of limiters can spice the gameplay up a bit, but I think that an additional gameplay mechanic like the platforming mentioned in the review would have been perfect. The music in the game was so unbelievably good that the first thing I did after completing it was go and download the soundtrack. For my personal opinion score, I gave Transistor 9 out of 10. That's it for my Transistor review. Let me know what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, and like, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.